inventory count training. This training is specifically for HMIS providers, so those of you that actually use the service point system. We're going to be covering all the aspects of the count and details for each different type of program. Go ahead and get started here. First thing we're going to want to cover is where everything is located. So all of your reports and your forms and the instructions are in the ART folder for this particular year. So I'll go ahead and pull that up so you can see it here. So I'm going to log into Service Point. And go to ART, Public Folder, General Reports, and Point in Time. And there is a January 2015 Point in Time folder. Inside the folder, you'll go ahead and see all the forms for the different types of project. And there's also housing forms. We also have the instructions, and some of the reports are now out here. So this is where everything will be located for you. Oops, out of the way here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start by talking about the emergency shelter and transitional housing folks, because they have more to do in the PIT than other program types. As far as the PIT count report, it has not yet been completed by our software manufacturer. It is being written right now, and as soon as it is completed, it will be placed out in that folder that I just showed you. It will look very similar to the HUD layout that was provided in their notice. This is what that layout looks like. So everything is broken out for you, and it gives you, and it breaks it into different types of households. So there's at least one adult, one child, without children, only children, and then there's lots of different subpopulations and veterans and things like that. So you're just going to have to run the report to check and see that the count looks good compared to what you know that you had on the night of the count. Just a reminder, the count is tomorrow, January 28th. That is when the point in time is going to be pulled from. So you'll have to wait. Even if the report was ready right now, you still have to wait 24 hours after the point in time count. So that's as far as the point in time for emergency shelter and transitional housing. That's all you have to do is you have to go out and run the report and check the numbers. If you see anything that's odd, you can go ahead and pull up client detail and see who's missing or who perhaps you don't think should be there. Normally, it's just issues with backdate mode and when they were put in, as far as why they're showing and why they're not. Next is the housing need for the emergency shelter and transitional housing. This is going to be the same as last year. There is, once you run your ART report, once it's ready, you're going to go ahead and, you've done your verification that it's accurate. You're going to pull up the housing need form, and you'll be putting in the information from the numbers that you pull up, and you'll be emailing a copy of that to me. Let me go ahead and pull that up and show you where that's at exactly. So for the forms for BOS, for example, for the emergency shelter, it's the same for transitional housing pretty much, so we're just going to go through one of them. Pull open the form, you'll click download because it's not an actual report, it's an actual document. Once you open that up, here we are. Here's where you'll have your housing needs. So you'll put in your program's information here. This is the number that you will get from the point in time report. You'll fill out these three different type of household types, and then down below is what you'll have to put in as far as the housing needs. So what type of program did the person need to obtain housing and end their homelessness? So if they just needed to stay in the emergency shelter and they went on to permanent housing, then you would just put them in that column. For the next one, it would be, did they actually need transitional housing, or did they need some type of permanent supportive housing, including support services? So let's say you had 5 people here. You'll see that it automatically highlights yellow down here. That's because these numbers have to match the total here and the number here. So if you put in that you had 2 people in emergency shelter and 3 that needed transitional housing. Once that equals 5, you'll see that the highlight goes away. So that's just something you want. It's a check to make sure that you have all of your numbers in there correctly and they're totaling all right. So you just send a copy of this to me, and that takes care of the housing need. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the actual inventory count part, the HIC part. This is going to be slightly different than we've done in previous years. Because of the new data standards, there's lots of organizational information that we need to gather from every single provider. So therefore, we're just going to go ahead and we've provided forms that are out there, out in the ART folder. And you're going to go ahead and just fill in your bed information, and you'll fill out the provider-specific information, and then you'll go ahead and send those in to me as well. I'll go ahead and pull one up of those here so you can take a look at it. So here are our forms here. Again, right now I'm just going to stick with emergency shelter and transitional housing, and we'll get to the others in just a few minutes. So for emergency shelter, we'll go ahead and pull up your HIC form. And here it is. So you put in the provider name, facility name. None of that is new. One thing that is new is the federal funding type. So if you have federal funding, which wouldn't include SAF because that's a state program, but if you have any federal funding, you can go ahead and select it from the drop-down, and then we would need the grant identifier for that type of funding. So if your funding is an ESG, which type, if it's a COC, which type here. If you have more than one funding, there is a spot for you to choose a secondary funding source as well. You'll select which continuum of care, which most people on this call should be 501 balanced state. Then you're going to get into the actual bed count. Now, if you haven't done this before, there is an instructions sheet out on the ART drive. It's the guidelines for counting beds and how to do that. So it goes through all the different kinds of scenarios, what the bed size versus what does that mean for an actual bed count. Cribs, mats, cots, or do those get counted, do those not? It talks about counting units, and then it talks about overflow beds and seasonal beds as well. So if you've never done the HIC before and you're not familiar with exactly how you should be counting it, this sheet will help you guide you through that. All right, so you'll have your overall bed count. When you have changes from the previous year, this is where you're going to need to tell us just basically what happened. If beds switch from single to family or vice versa. And out here in ART, we have the 2014 HIC inventory. So this is what you can pull up to see what you had last year, so you can get a basis to start off of. So let me pull that open here. Here it is. And so you're able to sort by your organization. So you'll just pull up your specific organization and you'll see what type of beds you previously reported for last year. And that will give you a good starting point. So you can start by entering in those numbers into your HIC form and then double check your inventory and make changes. And if there's changes, just let us know why there are changes and you put them right here. There's breakdowns in bed inventory. There's a youth bed inventory. If you have any, then we'd want you to put your information here. Veterans beds. There's a section here for seasonal beds and overflow beds as well. The target population, that shouldn't, there we go. That shouldn't change, but if it has changed or you just need to re-verify it, please do so here. These abbreviations are spelled out below. Down below here are all the different drop-downs and what they mean. So the federal funding is down here, as well as your target population, A and B. One thing that has changed this year is that we need a program address for all providers in the system. So we're going to ask you for that. If you have a scattered site, just go ahead and indicate scattered and then just provide your city and zip. And we can go ahead and report that to HUD, and they said that that was okay. So that's the housing inventory and what you're going to need to send in. For emergency shelter and transitional housing, again, is basically the exact same thing. Now, for permanent supportive housing, also referred to as permanent housing, This report is actually already ready for you out in the ARC because it doesn't need quite as much information that you had for the emergency shelter transitional housing. So you're going to want to go ahead and review it for accuracy and provide any information on bed count changing when you return your HIC form. So if you go out here to the PIT folder, down here is your PH PIT count. So it's your permanent housing PIT count. So you'll run this report, and check the numbers versus what you have in the system. As far as the HIC form, go ahead and pull that one up, and it's slightly different than the emergency shelter and transitional housing one. It doesn't ask you quite as much breakdown as that one did. One thing that is different, though, is that we have this question on whether or not disability is actually required for your program. Because now that instead of permanent supportive housing, permanent housing is an overall account, so this actually helps us determine which section in permanent housing you would be categorized into. Everything else besides that is basically the same as before. Okay, so that's permanent housing. For rapid rehousing, in previous years we had a report you could run to get the count. However, for ESG, there's no longer any requirement to do transactions for rent assistance. Therefore, we're going to have to do a self-reported count for rapid rehousing, and so we have a special form for that. As well, out here in ART, we have the HIC and PIT for RRH. I'll go ahead and pull that up for you now. All right, so the HIC part is actually just the funding and the address and all that information. The PIT is down here, and we only need this little bit of information. So for rapid rehousing, you're only going to include clients and households who are housed and receiving rental assistance from rapid rehousing program on the night of the count, which is tomorrow. Once you have that information, you'll fill it out here and you'll send it in to me. And that'll be it for rapid rehousing. Now, SSVF is still required to do transactions for the rental assistance. So that one, we do still have the report for you, and it is out here already. It's the SSVF PIT count, or that one is one where you'll run it, verify that the numbers look good. And then we also have an SSVF HIC form here for you. It's very similar to other ones we've already gone over, but just to cover everything, I'll go ahead and fill it out. And you can see here that all it is really is just go ahead and get the site information and the provider information, and that's basically it, because the rapid rehousing numbers will be getting from the report. Okay. So that is basically everything that we're going to be doing this year. It's not a lot has changed from last year. We're just asking for a little bit more information. Therefore, we're having you just send in whole forms instead of doing phone interviews. But I think that it will actually be, hopefully be a good experience still. If you have any questions, you're free to call us or email us with anything. Like I said, everything is out on the web. We'll be posting a recording from one of these webinars that we've done several of. And as soon as the actual PIT report for emergency shelter and transitional housing is ready, we will be putting it out there in that folder, and we'll most likely be sending out some type of bulletin to let everybody know. So that went rather fast. So if there's any questions, any specifics, or anyone would like to ask me, if you could go ahead and type it into the questions section, and I can go ahead and address those now. If you don't have any questions, you're free to drop off at this point. And if you think of any questions later, you're free to go ahead and email those in, and we'll send those out. So I'll go ahead and give a few seconds. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and feel free to start typing them now. Doesn't look like we have any, so I guess we're going to go ahead and cut this short and go ahead and end the webinar. So thank you very much for attending. If you have any other questions or you think of anything that needs to be further clarified about what's going to be going on this year, please let us know. Thank you very much. You have a good day.